Hello, Keerthana. Thank you for joining me for this interview today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Catherine.
Keerthana, you are a business English specialist teaching in India. How big is the demand for this type of services?
I would say the demand for business communication training in India is very significant and growing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
One, due to the country's role as a global hub for IT services,
Mm-hmm.
outsourcing, and multinational corporations. Two, companies are keen on upskilling their
Mm-hmm.
employees in various areas like client communication, report writing,
Mm-hmm.
negotiation, and presentation skills. They want to cater
Mm-hmm.
to their international clients effectively. So for example, employees in call centers and IT support roles,
Mm-hmm.
they require fluency in
Mm-hmm.
business communication to meet global standards because they're
Mm-hmm.
dealing
Right.
with clients from various other countries. And leadership and management professionals also seek
Mm-hmm.
trainings, to present ideas during boardroom meetings, during
Mm-hmm.
international conferences, various other networking events. So, business communication training is very significant and rapidly
Right.
growing in the Indian markets.
I see. Mm-hmm. Could you please tell me what are the main differences between the business culture in India and other English speaking countries? For example, the UK and the USA.
I believe that business cultures are greatly influenced by a country's
Mm-hmm.
beliefs and value system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I believe that
Mm-hmm.
Indian business cultures have got its own, unique
Mm-hmm.
traits, which can come as a shocker
Oh.
to business cultures from the West. One thing that is quite common that most people would notice is that Indian workplaces often have a more hierarchical structure than those in the US or the UK. Employees they hesitate to challenge authority, or even sometimes they may not express dissent openly. For example, if I had to say a junior employee, if if the employee was in a meeting with um, a manager, and he or she has to contradict him, they wouldn't do it openly, you know. But in the US, I'm sure this is seen as a healthy debate, but that's not the case in India. Hierarchy is taken very seriously. Um, Another thing that I have noticed is that, in India, business relationships are often personal. Trust is built over informal conversations, sometimes even extending to family matters. This can come as a shock to many Western cultures. In India, even during business, socializing events, people talk about their families, about their friends. They can even question you about your own families, which sometimes people from the West can find a little uncomfortable. Um, Another thing, and the last thing that comes to my mind is about time sensitivity. In India, punctuality, or timelines is viewed more liberally or more flexibly. But I think that's not the case in US and UK. You know, deadlines and punctuality, I think they are non-negotiable. So in India, I think time is a little bit more flexible, timelines and deadlines, and Indians have their own unique way of problem solving in the last moment, or maybe 1 or 2 days past the deadlines to complete the work, and we call it jugaad in a very funny manner. So yeah, time sensitivity is another, business cultural difference that I have noticed.
I see. Thank you. Would you say it's easier to communicate with British speakers since India and the UK share such an intertwined past and present?
Oh, not at all. While India's, historical and cultural ties with the UK might suggest some sort of ease in communication. It's not at all the case. You know, um, the shared use of English does help, but there are a whole lot of differences in terms of accents, idioms, and sometimes even contexts can still lead to misunderstandings. For example, in Indian English, you know, we've got our own unique idiomatic expressions. If I had to think of an example, prepone, which means to reschedule earlier. This is something that we Indians use quite often. And I'm sure if a British person heard the term prepone, he would be quite flabbergasted, because British speakers, they wouldn't understand. So that said, the British use of indirect language resonates more with Indian communication styles, than the directness of Americans.
And what are the main difficulties with teaching English that you notice when teaching Indians?
India is a very linguistically diverse country. It has got over 100 languages of its own,
Okay.
and more than 15-20,000 regional dialects of these languages. So naturally, mother tongue influence um, is one of the most difficult challenges that I face while teaching business English in India. Pronunciation and syntax of their own mother tongue sometimes seeps into their English language, and these can sometimes affect the intelligibility quotient. So, um, even within India, people speaking in English from different states have sometimes difficulty in understanding each other. So that is definitely a challenge. Another challenge I would say is the overemphasis on grammar. Um, Many Indians, they are taught English with a focus on written grammar, often at the expense of speaking and listening skills. And I feel that, you know, this may lead to employees maybe having the skills to write well, not with fluency during verbal communication. So, overemphasis on grammar is a big challenge that we English teachers, business English teachers, have to solve. And another, prevalent challenge would be cultural hesitation. Indians, we often, fear making mistakes in while speaking in English. So there is a certain sense of inhibition that can affect their willingness to practice speaking. So I think um, a, a colonial mindset that people still holding on to, that if you speak really good English, you are climbing, you are high up in the social ladder. I think this kind of a colonial mindset is still prevalent, but I think things are slowly changing. But I think we still have a long way to go.
What are the most frequent cases and reasons for misunderstanding between Indian colleagues and foreigners?
As I said earlier, um, the indirectness of British English has a lot of influence in Indian English as well. So, in India, we often use indirect language to avoid confrontation or to give a negative feedback. If I had to give an example, if I say I'll try my best in India, most probably I'm implying no. Okay, and while in people from other languages might interpret it as a commitment. So this kind of an indirect communication can sometimes cause misunderstandings between foreign colleagues. Apart from that, cultural contexts can can also lead to misunderstandings sometimes. Accent, pace of delivery, and even sense of humor. Indian workplaces often lean towards formal interactions, so sarcasm or irony that is common in British or American humor, it can be sometimes misunderstood in an Indian context. So a lot of factors do exist that can cause misunderstandings, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And finally, what cultural aspects should foreign colleagues keep in mind when doing business with Indians?
Oh, if you're doing business with India, you shouldn't be shocked if during a small talk or during a socializing event somebody asks about the well-being of your family or your friends. Because in India, um, you know, relationships are built at a personal level. So starting meetings with a casual conversation about food, festival, or even family is greatly appreciated. Um, so in India, a lot of respect given for hierarchy, addressing senior colleagues with formal titles, formally greeting them, unless you are explicitly asked otherwise. Um, um, and, pretty much respecting the hierarchy. This is something that Indian business cultures value. Um, Another thing that I can think of is, you know, being a little more flexible and patient because, there could be any last minute changes. And as I said earlier, a jugaad, you know, creatively solving problems at the very last moments. I mean, these are something that is quite unique to Indian business cultures. So this is also something that a person doing business with India should keep in mind.
Keerthana, thank you so much for doing this interview. It was extremely informative and interesting, and I hope you join us again for another round. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for taking the time to talk with me. I'd really appreciate the thoughtful questions and the chance to share my perspectives. Looking forward to the next meeting. Thank you so much.